The morning Samuel Whitfield arrived at Thornton Enterprises headquarters in downtown Dallas began, like any other day, with a prayer. At 58 years old, Samuel had been cleaning the towering glass monument to capitalism for 12 years, always starting his shift at 4 in the morning with the same quiet words of gratitude. Lord, help me serve you today in whatever way you need, even if it's just pushing this mop. Samuel had learned long ago that God worked in mysterious ways. His late wife, Ruth, a cardiac nurse for 25 years before cancer took her home 3 years ago, had taught him that every person you meet is an opportunity to show Christ's love, even if they never know it. Especially if they never know it, she would say with that gentle smile that still visited him in dreams. The 42nd floor executive suite was always his last stop, saved for when the sun would just begin to paint the Dallas skyline gold. Richard Thornton, the 60-year-old billionaire who had built his empire on ruthless efficiency and cold logic, was notorious for working through the night. Samuel had seen him maybe 5 times in 12 years, each encounter lasting seconds as the mogul swept past without acknowledgement, treating Samuel like he was part of the furniture. But this morning was different. Through the frosted glass of the corner office, Samuel saw Richard Thornton collapsed in his leather chair, his face an alarming shade of grey, one hand clutching his chest while the other fumbled with his phone. The symptoms hit Samuel like a lightning bolt of recognition. Ruth had drilled them into him during their 30 years of marriage. Classic signs of cardiac distress, possibly a heart attack in progress. Samuel didn't hesitate. He pushed through the door, his cleaning cart forgotten in the hallway. "Mr. Thornton, sir, you're having a cardiac event. Don't try to stand. I'm calling 911 right now." Richard's eyes, usually sharp as a hawk's when dealing with billion-dollar mergers, were clouded with pain and confusion. Who are you?" The words came out strained, barely audible. "Samuel Whitfield, sir. I clean your offices. Been doing it for 12 years. But right now, I need you to chew this aspirin." Samuel pulled a small bottle from his pocket, the one Ruth had insisted he always carry. His fingers moved with practiced efficiency as he called emergency services with his other hand. "Yes, this is Thornton Enterprises, 42nd floor, 60-year-old male presenting with chest pain, difficulty breathing, grey complexion, possible myocardial infarction. Please hurry." The dispatcher sounded surprised at the clinical precision from someone who identified himself as a janitor. But Samuel didn't care about her assumptions. He cared about the man whose life was hanging by a thread. Richard tried to protest, to assert the control that had defined his entire life, but Samuel gently but firmly kept him seated, monitoring his pulse with 2 fingers on his wrist, just like Ruth had shown him. "Mr. Thornton, I know you're used to being in charge, but right now you need to let me help you. My wife was a cardiac nurse. I know what I'm doing." The 15 minutes before the paramedics arrived felt like hours. Samuel stayed with Richard, talking to him in a calm, steady voice, keeping him conscious and as relaxed as possible. He noticed things during those long minutes, details that would later prove crucial. The prescription bottles on Richard's desk, all from the same doctor. The way Richard kept trying to say something about his brother. The fear in the billionaire's eyes that went beyond the immediate medical crisis. When the paramedics burst through the door, they found Samuel had already loosened Richard's tie, positioned him correctly, and was providing a detailed medical history based on observations and the medications visible on the desk. One paramedic, a young woman named Jennifer, whispered to her partner, "This janitor knows more about cardiac emergency response than half the doctors I work with." Samuel watched them wheel Richard away, then did something that would have made Richard uncomfortable if he'd known. He knelt right there in the expensive office and prayed, "Lord, I don't know why you put me here this morning, but I know you did. Please guide the doctor's hands. Save this man's life. You have a plan for him, I can feel it." What Samuel didn't know was that his prayer was about to unveil a conspiracy that would shake the foundations of one of Texas's largest corporations, test his faith in ways he never imagined, and ultimately lead to the salvation of not just Richard Thornton's life, but his soul. The next evening, Samuel arrived for his shift to find a security guard waiting at his usual entrance. "Samuel Whitfield, you're to report to Human Resources immediately." The guard's tone suggested this wasn't a social visit. The HR office on the 10th floor was a place Samuel had only been twice, once when he was hired and once for a routine background check update. Now, sitting across from him was Gregory Hartwell, Senior Vice President of Operations and, everyone knew, Richard Thornton's younger brother by 5 years. Gregory had the same sharp features as Richard, but wore them with less authority and more barely concealed resentment. "Mr. Whitfield," Gregory began, his fingers steepled like a movie villain, which might have been funny if his expression wasn't so serious. "We need to discuss your unauthorized access to executive areas and your interference with Mr. Thornton's medical care." Samuel felt his jaw drop. "Interference? Sir, I saved your brother's life. The doctors at Presbyterian Hospital confirmed he was having a major heart attack. If I hadn't acted when I did—" Gregory raised a hand, silencing him. "You're a janitor, Mr. Whitfield, not a medical professional. You had no right to administer medication or make medical decisions. Our legal team is concerned about liability issues. Furthermore, you accessed areas outside your designated cleaning zone." Samuel studied Gregory's face, and something Ruth used to say echoed in his mind. "When people get angry about you doing good, ask yourself what bad thing your good deed interrupted." There was something in Gregory's eyes, a nervousness that didn't match his authoritative tone. "With all due respect, Mr. Hartwell, I was in my designated area. The executive floor is part of my regular route. And I didn't administer medication, I offered aspirin, which is standard first aid for suspected heart attacks. Any liability concern should be outweighed by the fact that your brother is alive." Gregory's face flushed. "Nevertheless, we're placing you on administrative leave pending a full investigation. You'll receive full pay, but you're not to enter the building or contact any Thornton Enterprises employees until further notice." Samuel stood slowly, his knees protesting after years of kneeling to clean floors. He looked Gregory directly in the eye. "I'll pray for you, Mr. Hartwell, and for your brother." The dismissive snort Gregory gave in response would have bothered Samuel once. But Ruth had taught him that the people who mocked prayer were often the ones who needed it most. Walking out of the building, Samuel felt a strange peace despite the obvious injustice. In his truck, a beat-up Ford that was older than some of his co-workers, he found his worn Bible on the passenger seat and opened it to Ephesians. Finally, "Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can take your stand against the devil's schemes." He didn't know it yet, but he would need that armor for what was coming. 3 days into his forced leave, Samuel was at Blessed Redeemer Baptist Church, helping Pastor Williams prepare for the Wednesday evening service when his phone rang. The number was private, but something made him answer. "Mr. Whitfield, this is Richard Thornton." The voice was weaker than the commanding tone Samuel had heard in corporate videos, but unmistakably the billionaire. "I need to see you. Can you come to Presbyterian Hospital, room 812, the cardiac unit?" Samuel arrived to find Richard propped up in a hospital bed that probably cost more per day than Samuel made in a week. The billionaire looked diminished, but his eyes were sharp and focused. Various monitors beeped steadily, and an IV dripped clear fluid into his arm. "Mr. Whitfield," Richard began, then paused. "No, Samuel. May I call you Samuel?" "Of course, sir." Richard almost smiled. "The doctors tell me I should be dead. The widowmaker, they called it. 90% blockage in the left anterior descending artery. Another 10 minutes, and—" He trailed off, looking out the window at the Dallas skyline. They also told me that your quick actions, specifically the aspirin and keeping me calm, probably made the difference between recovery and catastrophic damage. Samuel shifted uncomfortably. I just did what anyone would do, sir. That's just it, Richard said, turning back to him with an intensity that reminded Samuel why this man commanded boardrooms. You didn't do what anyone would do. You did what someone with specific medical knowledge would do. The paramedics said you gave them information that helped them treat me more effectively. Why does a janitor know emergency cardiology? Samuel told him about Ruth, about the years of dinner conversations that were inadvertent medical education, about her insistence that knowledge could save lives anywhere, anytime. Richard listened without interrupting, something Samuel suspected was rare for him. When Samuel finished, Richard was quiet for a long moment. Your wife sounds like she was a remarkable woman. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, sir. She's with the Lord now. No more pain. Richard's expression shifted slightly, a mixture of discomfort and something else, maybe envy. You really believe that, don't you? That she's in some better place? With all my heart, sir. Richard studied him with the same intensity he probably used to evaluate billion-dollar deals. Samuel, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen very carefully. My brother Gregory has been trying to have me declared mentally incompetent for the past year. He's been working with my personal physician, Dr. Nathan Prescott, to document a pattern of what they call erratic behavior and declining mental capacity. Samuel felt a chill run down his spine. The prescription bottles on your desk. Richard nodded grimly. Prescribed by Prescott. I've been feeling worse and worse over the past 8 months. Confusion, fatigue, chest pains that Prescott insisted were anxiety. He kept increasing my medications, saying I was working too hard, that I needed to step back from the company. Gregory would be right there, offering to take over more responsibilities to help me through this difficult time. Samuel thought about Gregory's reaction to the saved life, the anger that should have been relief. Sir, do you think they... Richard finished the thought. Were they actively trying to kill me, or just hoping my declining health would naturally lead to my death or incapacitation? I don't know. But Samuel, when I mentioned Gregory while you were helping me, I was trying to warn you. I saw him on the security monitor entering my office at 3 in the morning, an hour before you found me. He's never in the office before 8. The implications hung in the air between them like a toxic cloud. Samuel felt his hands clench involuntarily. That's attempted murder, sir. You need to go to the police. With what proof? Richard's laugh was bitter. Gregory is too smart to leave evidence. Prescott's medical records would show a pattern of legitimate concern for a patient exhibiting signs of stress and decline. The medications he prescribed are all legal, just potentially harmful when combined in the doses he was giving me. And now, with my heart attack, they can claim it proves they were right about my declining health. Samuel was quiet for a moment, then spoke carefully. Mr. Thornton, can I share something with you? Something my Ruth used to say. Richard nodded. She used to say that God doesn't close doors, he opens windows. Sometimes what looks like the worst thing is actually his way of saving us from something even worse. Your heart attack, sir. It got you away from those medications, away from their influence, and into a place where independent doctors could evaluate you. Richard stared at him. You're saying God gave me a heart attack to save my life? That's the most ridiculous. He stopped, his expression changing. Actually, when you put it that way, it's almost logical. If there were a God, which there isn't, but if there were, I suppose that would be ironically efficient. Samuel smiled slightly. Ruth also used to say God has a sense of humor. He just waits longer for the punchline than we do. Over the next hour, Samuel learned more about the conspiracy. Gregory had been slowly positioning himself to take over, using his influence to stack the board with allies. Prescott had been college roommates with Gregory, their friendship going back 40 years. The medications Richard had been taking were all legitimate prescriptions, but their combination and dosages were calibrated to cause confusion, fatigue, and eventually organ failure that would look like natural causes in a stressed executive. The new cardiologist here, Dr. Sarah Morrison, she's not connected to Prescott or Gregory, Richard explained. She's already found irregularities in my blood work that suggest chronic poisoning, not acute cardiac disease. But proving it was intentional, that's nearly impossible. Samuel thought about all the floors he'd cleaned, all the trash cans he'd emptied, all the conversations he'd overheard without meaning to. 12 years of being invisible had taught him that powerful people often forgot the help had ears. Mr. Thornton, what if I told you that I might know someone who could help? Someone who's very good with technology and has a strong sense of justice. Richard raised an eyebrow. A janitor with connections. A janitor who goes to church with a former Army intelligence officer who now runs a private security firm. David Mitchell. He's helped our church with security issues, and he's mentioned that corporate espionage is a growing part of his business. Richard's expression sharpened into the look of a predator who'd just spotted prey. Bring him. Tomorrow, 10 in the morning. Samuel stood to leave, but Richard called him back. Samuel, why are you helping me? I've ignored you for 12 years. I've never even said thank you for cleaning my office. I'm not exactly what you'd call a good person. Samuel turned back, seeing not a billionaire but a lonely, frightened man who'd just discovered his own brother wanted him dead. Because that's what Christians do, Mr. Thornton. We help people who need it, whether they deserve it or not. Just like Christ helped us when we didn't deserve it. Richard's voice was unusually quiet. I don't believe in your Christ, Samuel. I know, sir, but he believes in you. That's why I was there that morning. Not coincidence. Providence. As Samuel left, he didn't see the way Richard stared after him, or the way the billionaire's hand unconsciously moved to the bedside table where a Gideon Bible sat untouched. But God saw, and somewhere in heaven, Ruth Whitfield was smiling. David Mitchell looked like he'd been carved from granite and dressed by a military surplus store. At 45, the former Army intelligence officer still moved with the controlled precision of someone who'd spent years in places where a wrong step meant death. His private security firm, Shepherd Security Solutions, operated from a nondescript building in Richardson, but Samuel knew from church conversations that David's client list included some of the biggest names in Texas. When Samuel brought him to Richard's hospital room, the two men sized each other up like fighters before a match. Richard saw competence and controlled violence. David saw wealth and desperation. Both recognized a potential ally. After Richard explained the situation, David was quiet for exactly 10 seconds, then spoke with military precision. Mr. Thornton, what you're describing is a classic internal corporate coup with attempted murder as the accelerant. The pattern is almost textbook. Family member with access, compromised medical professional, gradual decline to avoid suspicion. The question is, do you want justice or revenge? Richard's answer was immediate. Justice. Revenge would be satisfying, but it wouldn't fix the damage Gregory has done to my company. David nodded approvingly. Then we do this legally but strategically. I'll need 3 things. Access to your corporate security systems, a list of every person Gregory has brought into the company in the last 2 years, and Samuel. Samuel started. Me? What can I do? David smiled, and it wasn't entirely pleasant. You've been invisible in that building for 12 years. You know every corner, every routine, every person who works late and every person who leaves early. You're going to be my inside man. Well, technically, you're on administrative leave, so you'll be my outside man, who knows the inside. But first, we need to get you officially reinstated. Richard picked up his phone. Gregory. Yes, I'm feeling better. Listen. I've been thinking about that janitor situation. Yes, the one who helped me. I want him reinstated immediately. No, not tomorrow, today. Because I said so, and last time I checked, I still own 51% of this company. Yes, that's a threat. Have HR call him within the hour. He hung up and looked at Samuel. You start back tonight. Same shift, same areas, but now you're working for David too. Think you can handle that? Samuel thought about Ruth, about all the times she'd stood up to arrogant doctors who dismissed nurses' observations, about her quiet strength in the face of injustice. "Yes, sir, but I have one condition." Richard's eyebrows rose. Most people didn't give him conditions. "Wednesday nights and Sunday mornings I'm at church, non-negotiable, and I won't do anything illegal or that would harm innocent people." David laughed, a short bark of approval. "I like him, Thornton. He's got boundaries. Those are rare in corporate espionage." "Don't worry, Samuel. Everything we do will be completely legal. Unethical by corporate standards, maybe, but legal." That night, Samuel returned to Thornton Enterprises with a small device David had given him, no bigger than a thumb drive. "All you have to do is plug this into any computer on the executive floor for 30 seconds. It's not a virus or malware, it's a network mapper. It will show us the digital trail of every email, every file transfer, every communication between Gregory and his conspirators." As Samuel pushed his cleaning cart through the familiar hallways, he felt the weight of his mission, but he also felt something else, the presence of God walking beside him. Ruth had always said that God equipped his people for the battles he called them to fight. Tonight, his equipment was a mop, a bucket, and a tiny piece of technology that would expose corruption. The executive floor was nearly empty at 2 in the morning, just the way Samuel liked it. He cleaned methodically, working his way toward Gregory's office. The younger Thornton brother had taken over the second-largest corner suite, a place of chrome and glass that felt cold even in the Texas summer. Samuel unlocked the door with his master key, a privilege of trusted janitors, and began his routine. Empty trash, dust surfaces, vacuum carpet. And while the vacuum hummed loudly, he inserted David's device into Gregory's computer. 30 seconds felt like 30 minutes, but finally, the tiny light on the device blinked green. Mission accomplished. What Samuel didn't expect was for the elevator to ding just as he was removing the device. He quickly pocketed it and grabbed his cleaning cloth, wiping down the desk as Gregory Hartwell himself walked in, accompanied by Dr. Nathan Prescott. Both men froze when they saw Samuel. Gregory recovered first, his face darkening with anger. "What are you doing in my office?" Samuel held up his cleaning cloth with practiced calm. "Cleaning, sir. Mr. Thornton had me reinstated this afternoon. I'm back on my regular shift." Gregory looked like he wanted to argue, but Prescott put a hand on his arm. "Let it go, Greg. He's just the janitor." But the way Prescott said it, the slight emphasis on just, made Samuel look at him more closely. The doctor was in his early 60s, with the soft look of someone who enjoyed expensive dinners more than exercise. His eyes were bloodshot, and Samuel could smell alcohol from 6 feet away. "Working late, Dr. Prescott?" Samuel asked innocently as he gathered his supplies. The doctor's eyes narrowed. "Mind your own business, janitor." As Samuel pushed his cart toward the door, he heard Gregory whisper urgently to Prescott, but couldn't make out the words. He did, however, see Prescott pull a prescription bottle from his pocket and hand it to Gregory. The label was facing away, but Samuel recognized the shape and color of the bottle. It was identical to the ones on Richard's desk the morning of the heart attack. In the hallway, Samuel's phone vibrated. A text from David. "Got everything, gold mine, meet tomorrow morning 6 a.m., my office." Samuel finished his shift, but his mind was racing. As dawn broke over Dallas, painting the glass towers in shades of orange and pink, he sat in his truck and opened his Bible to Romans. "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Lord, Samuel prayed aloud in the empty parking garage, "I don't know your full plan here, but I trust it. Help me to be your instrument of justice. And Lord, if it's your will, help Mr. Thornton find you through all this. He's lost and hurting, and he doesn't even know he needs you, but you know, you always know." The next morning, David's office looked like a command center from a spy movie. Multiple monitors displayed emails, financial records, and corporate documents. David and his assistant, A young woman named Angela, who apparently had a master's degree in computer forensics, were going through data with the intensity of archaeologists who'd just found a lost tomb. "Samuel, you hit the mother lode," David said without preamble. "Gregory has been planning this for 3 years. Look at this." The screen showed an email chain between Gregory and Prescott dating back 36 months. The early messages were subtle, discussing Richard's stress levels and the need for medical intervention, but as the months progressed, the conspiracy became explicit. Prescott detailed medication combinations that would cause cognitive decline without triggering obvious red flags. Gregory discussed timing for board meetings and stock manipulations. "But here's the smoking gun," Angela said, pulling up a financial record. "Gregory has been shorting Thornton Enterprises stock through a shell company in the Caymans. He stood to make $40 million when Richard died or was declared incompetent, and the stock crashed." Samuel felt sick. He was willing to destroy his own brother for money. David's expression was grim. "It gets worse. Look at this email from 2 days before Richard's heart attack." The message was from Prescott to Gregory. "Increased dosage as discussed. Should see results within 48 to 72 hours. Cardiac event likely. Have papers ready. They tried to kill him," Samuel breathed. "They actually tried to murder him." Angela pulled up another document. "And they weren't working alone. Gregory has promises of support from 6 board members. They were going to stage a hostile takeover the moment Richard was gone, using his mental decline as justification for why the company needed new leadership." Samuel thought about Richard alone in that hospital room, betrayed by his own brother. "Lord, give me wisdom," he prayed silently. "How do we handle this?" As if reading his mind, David said, "We could take this straight to the FBI, but corporate crime like this can take years to prosecute. Gregory would have time to destroy evidence, intimidate witnesses, maybe even flee the country. Or, Samuel prompted, "or we give Richard the evidence and let him handle it his way. It's his company, his brother, his life they tried to destroy. What do you think, Samuel? You've got more skin in this game than any of us." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, then spoke carefully. "There's a passage in Proverbs. When justice is done, it brings joy to the righteous, but terror to evildoers. I think Mr. Thornton deserves the chance to choose his own justice. But I also think he needs to understand that vengeance belongs to the Lord, not to us." David and Angela exchanged glances. Angela spoke first. "You know, Mr. Whitfield, I'm not religious myself, but I respect your stance. It's consistent." David stood up, decision made. "All right, we take everything to Richard. Samuel, you should be there. You've earned that right. Angela, prepare a comprehensive presentation. Every email, every financial transaction, every piece of evidence. Make it bulletproof." As they prepared to leave, Samuel's phone rang. It was Richard. "Samuel, I need you at the hospital immediately. Something's happened." Samuel's heart sank. Was Richard having another cardiac event? Had Gregory somehow gotten to him again? He rushed to Presbyterian Hospital, David following in his own vehicle. They found Richard not in medical distress, but in a state of cold fury. He was dressed in a business suit, looking every inch the billionaire CEO, despite the IV still attached to his arm. In his hand was a legal document. "Gregory just tried to have me declared mentally incompetent," he said without preamble. "He got a judge to issue a temporary evaluation order based on Prescott's medical reports. If I hadn't had Dr. Morrison here to contradict Prescott's claims, I'd be in a psychiatric ward right now while Gregory took over the company." David stepped forward. "Mr. Thornton, we have everything you need to bury them both. Emails, financial records, proof of conspiracy to commit murder. It's all here." For the next hour, they went through the evidence. Richard's expression never changed, but Samuel saw his knuckles go white as he gripped the papers detailing his brother's betrayal. When they finished, the room was silent except for the steady beep of medical monitors. Finally, Richard spoke. In my world, Samuel, we have a saying, it's not personal, it's business. But this is personal. My own brother, the man I protected from bullies when we were kids. The man I brought into my company when no one else would hire him because of his drinking problem. He tried to kill me for money he didn't even need. I pay him $8 million a year. Samuel saw the pain beneath the anger and felt moved to speak. Mr. Thornton, I know this hurts. Betrayal always does. But you have a choice now. You can destroy him completely and no one would blame you. Or you can seek justice without vengeance. It's your decision, but may I share something? Richard nodded wearily. When Judas betrayed Jesus, Christ knew it was coming. He could have stopped it, could have exposed Judas to the other disciples, could have had him arrested. But he didn't. He let justice take its course while still showing love. I'm not saying you should let Gregory go unpunished, but maybe consider what justice looks like versus what revenge looks like. Richard stared at him. You're comparing my brother to Judas and me to Jesus. That's blasphemous even to an atheist. No, sir. I'm saying that even in the worst betrayal, we have a choice about how we respond. That choice defines who we are. Richard was quiet for a long moment, then turned to David. I want a board meeting called for tomorrow morning, emergency session. Have Angela prepare a presentation of all the evidence. And David, I want security there, real security, not Gregory's people. What about the FBI? David asked. After the board meeting, I want to give Gregory one chance to confess, to show some remorse. If he doesn't, then we involve law enforcement. Samuel felt a surge of respect for Richard. Even in his pain, he was choosing a path that allowed for the possibility of redemption. That night, Samuel couldn't sleep. He spent hours in prayer, not just for Richard, but for Gregory too. Lord, I don't understand why people hurt each other like this, especially family. But you do. You see everything, know everything. Please, God, let some good come from all this pain. Let your will be done tomorrow. The boardroom of Thornton Enterprises had never been so tense. 15 board members sat around the polished table, confusion and concern on their faces. Richard entered last, still looking pale from his recovery, but radiating the authority that had built his empire. Samuel stood in the back corner, officially there as a witness, but feeling very much out of place among the suits and power players. Gregory entered with Prescott and 3 other board members who were clearly his allies. He looked confident, even smug, until he saw David Mitchell standing by the door with 2 other security personnel. What's this about, Richard? Gregory asked, trying to maintain his composure. You should be resting, recovering. Dr. Prescott says a lot of things, Richard interrupted, like how I was showing signs of mental decline, like how I needed increasingly powerful medications for my anxiety, like how my stress was killing me. Interesting diagnosis, considering Dr. Morrison at Presbyterian found evidence of systematic poisoning in my blood work. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Gregory's face went white, but he tried to rally. Richard, you're clearly still affected by your cardiac event. These paranoid delusions. Richard held up his hand, and Angela entered with a laptop and projector. Let me show you all something interesting. Angela? For the next 30 minutes, the evidence played out on the screen. Emails, financial records, the shell company, the stock shorting, everything. The board members' expressions shifted from confusion to shock to anger. One elderly member, Walter Brennan, who had been with the company since its founding, looked physically ill. When the presentation ended, Richard stood. Gregory, I'm giving you one chance. Confess. Show some remorse for trying to murder your own brother. Take responsibility and I'll make sure you get the best lawyers, the most comfortable prison. Fight me, and I'll destroy you so completely your grandchildren will change their names. Gregory stood slowly, his mask finally cracking. You want me to show remorse? For what? For trying to save this company from your megalomania? You sit up here in your tower, playing God with people's lives, never caring about anyone but yourself. You've never loved anyone, Richard. Not me, not our parents, not anyone. You're incapable of it. Samuel saw Richard flinch and felt compelled to speak. That's not true. Everyone turned to look at the janitor who had dared to interrupt a board meeting. Samuel continued, his voice steady. I've cleaned these offices for 12 years. I've seen Mr. Thornton work 18-hour days to avoid laying off employees during the recession. I've seen him secretly pay for workers' kids' college tuitions. I've seen the Christmas bonuses he gives that he never takes credit for. A man incapable of love doesn't do those things. But more importantly, Mr. Hartwell, your brother gave you a chance just now. A chance to repent, to make things right. That's love, even if you can't see it. Gregory's face contorted with rage. Who asked you, janitor? You don't belong here. You're nothing, nobody, just the help. David stepped forward. Actually, he's the man who saved your brother's life while you were trying to end it. He's the man whose observations led us to uncover your conspiracy. And he's the man showing more grace right now than you deserve. Prescott, who had been silent, suddenly spoke up. Greg, we should take the deal. This is over. Gregory spun on him. Shut up, you worthless drunk. This is your fault. If you'd done your job right, Richard would be dead and none of this would matter. The confession hung in the air like a poison cloud. Even Gregory's allies on the board were staring at him in horror. Walter Brennan stood up, his elderly frame shaking with anger. I motioned for the immediate removal of Gregory Hartwell from the board and from any position within Thornton Enterprises. I also motioned to ban him from company property and to cooperate fully with law enforcement in their investigation. The vote was unanimous, even Gregory's former allies voting against him. As security escorted Gregory and Prescott out, Gregory stopped in front of Samuel. You think you've won something here, janitor? You're still nothing. You'll always be nothing. Samuel met his gaze calmly. Mr. Hartwell, I'll pray for you. Even now it's not too late to change, to seek forgiveness. Gregory spat at his feet and was dragged away. The boardroom slowly emptied until only Richard and Samuel remained. The billionaire looked older, diminished by the weight of his brother's betrayal. He tried to kill me for money, Richard said quietly. My own brother wanted me dead for money. Samuel sat down next to him, ignoring all corporate protocol. It wasn't about the money, Mr. Thornton. It was about envy, pride, the feeling of being less than. Your brother felt like he lived in your shadow. That doesn't excuse what he did, but maybe understanding it helps. Richard looked at him. How do you not hate people, Samuel? After all the disrespect, the invisibility, the injustice? How do you still show kindness to someone like Gregory who literally spat at you? Because I've been forgiven for worse, Samuel said simply. Maybe not in human terms, but in God's eyes, we're all sinners in need of grace. I choose to extend the same grace I've received. Richard was quiet for a long moment. Your God asks a lot of his followers. He does, but he also gives us the strength to do it. We can't do it on our own. Richard stood up, straightening his tie in a gesture so familiar it must have been automatic. Samuel, I owe you more than I can ever repay. You saved my life, exposed my brother's betrayal, and somehow managed to keep me from becoming a monster in the process. Name your reward. Anything. Samuel stood too. Mr. Thornton, I don't want a reward, but if you're offering, there is something. Name it. Come to church with me this Sunday, just once, hear the message, meet the people, see why I am who I am. After that, if you never want to go again, I'll never mention it. Richard looked genuinely surprised. That's it? You could ask for millions and you want me to go to church? Money can't buy what you need, Mr. Thornton. But maybe, just maybe, you'll find it in that church. Richard extended his hand and they shook on it. You know I'm an atheist, right? This won't change anything. Samuel smiled. We'll see, Mr. Thornton. We'll see. Sunday morning came with the kind of perfect Texas weather that made people forget the brutal summers. Samuel arrived at Blessed Redeemer Baptist Church early, helping set up chairs and greeting people as they arrived. He'd told Pastor Williams to expect a special guest, but hadn't said who. Richard Thornton arrived in a car worth more than most of the congregation's homes combined, but he'd had the sense to dress down, wearing khakis and a simple button-down shirt instead of his usual designer suit. He looked profoundly uncomfortable, but determined, like a man fulfilling a business obligation. The congregation, mostly working-class families, didn't recognize him at first, but they welcomed him the way they welcomed everyone, with genuine warmth and hospitality. Sister Maria, an elderly woman who ran the church's food bank, insisted on hugging him. Brother Thomas, a mechanic with oil-stained hands, shook his hand enthusiastically and invited him to men's Bible study. Richard ended up sitting between Samuel and David Mitchell, looking bemused by the enthusiastic singing and amens that punctuated Pastor William's sermon. The message, by what Richard would later call cosmic coincidence but Samuel knew was providence, was about the prodigal son. "We always focus on the son who left," Pastor Williams said from the pulpit. But what about the brother who stayed? The one who got angry when his wayward sibling was welcomed back. He thought he deserved more because he'd been faithful, been good, been loyal. But here's the thing, church. Both brothers needed the Father's love. Both brothers needed grace. One needed forgiveness for his rebellion, the other needed forgiveness for his resentment. Samuel felt Richard stiffen beside him. The parallel to his situation with Gregory was impossible to miss. Pastor Williams continued, "Some of you here might be the wayward son, thinking you've gone too far to come home. Others might be the faithful son, angry at God for blessing people you think don't deserve it. But God's message is the same to both. Come home, let go, accept grace." After the service, Richard was quiet as the congregation filed out, many stopping to shake his hand and invite him back. It wasn't until they were in the parking lot that he spoke. "Your pastor knew about me and Gregory." Samuel shook his head. "Pastor Williams didn't know you were coming or who you were. That message has been planned for weeks. You can check the church bulletin from last month if you don't believe me." Richard stared at him. "You're telling me it's a coincidence that the sermon was about two brothers, betrayal, and forgiveness? I'm telling you there are no coincidences with God, Mr. Thornton. Only providence." They stood by Richard's luxury car, an awkward silence between them. Finally, Richard spoke. "Gregory's trial starts next month. The FBI says with the evidence we provided, he's looking at 25 years minimum. Prescott already pled guilty and got 15 years. He'll lose his medical license permanently. I know. I've been praying for them both." Richard looked genuinely puzzled. "Why?" "They tried to murder me. They would have succeeded if you hadn't been there." "Because they need prayer more than most. Prison will punish their bodies, but only God can change their hearts." Richard opened his car door, then paused. "Samuel, can I ask you something? Do you really believe all this? God, heaven, divine intervention? Or is it just comfort? A way to make sense of a senseless world?" Samuel thought carefully before answering. "Mr. Thornton, 3 weeks ago, I was just a janitor cleaning your office. Through a series of events that you call coincidence and I call God's plan, your life was saved, a conspiracy was exposed, and justice was served. You asked me to name my reward, and all I wanted was for you to come to church. Today, you heard a message that spoke directly to your situation, delivered by a pastor who didn't know you were coming. You can call all of that coincidence if you want. But at some point, don't you have to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there's something more going on?" Richard didn't answer, but Samuel saw something in his eyes, a crack in the armor of skepticism that had protected him for 60 years. The next few weeks brought dramatic changes. Gregory's assets were frozen pending trial, and several of his co-conspirators on the board quietly resigned. Richard restructured the company's leadership, implementing new safeguards against internal corruption. He also did something unexpected. He promoted Samuel to Director of Corporate Integrity, a new position created specifically to ensure that employees at every level had a voice in company operations. Samuel tried to refuse, insisting he wasn't qualified, but Richard wouldn't hear it. "You see things others miss, Samuel. You understand people in a way that can't be taught in business school. Besides, you'll still be working nights, just in a different capacity, investigating, observing, making sure no one else tries what Gregory did." The position came with a salary that made Samuel's head spin, more money than he'd ever dreamed of making. His first act was to increase his tithe to the church and set up a nursing scholarship in Ruth's name at the community college. Richard, meanwhile, had started meeting with Samuel for coffee every Friday morning. He claimed it was to discuss company security, but their conversations inevitably turned to deeper matters. "I've been reading," Richard said one morning, pulling out a worn Bible that Samuel recognized as the one from his hospital room, "trying to understand what you believe, why you believe it. It's not what I expected." "What did you expect? Fairy tales? Mythology?" "Instead, I'm finding history, philosophy, wisdom that's surprisingly applicable to business. This Proverbs book could be taught at Harvard Business School." Samuel smiled. "God's wisdom applies everywhere, Mr. Thornton. That's what makes it truth." Richard was quiet for a moment. "I went to see Gregory yesterday. In prison." Samuel set down his coffee cup. "How did that go?" "He wouldn't see me. Sent word that I was dead to him. But I left something for him, a Bible and a letter. Told him I forgave him." Samuel felt his eyes water. "That took courage, sir." Richard laughed bitterly. "Courage? I was terrified, but your pastor's words kept echoing in my head. Both brothers need grace. I can't make Gregory accept it, but I can offer it. That's all any of us can do." As Christmas approached, Richard surprised everyone by announcing that the company Christmas party would be held not at the usual five-star hotel, but at Blessed Redeemer Baptist Church's community center. The company would also be donating $1 million to the church's various outreach programs. The night of the party, Samuel watched Richard move through the crowd, shaking hands with janitors and executives alike, treating everyone with the same respect. The man who had once walked past Samuel like he was invisible now knew the names of every night shift cleaner in the building. Pastor Williams approached Samuel during the party. "That's not the same man who walked into our church 3 months ago. No, sir, it's not. God's been working on him and using you to do it. You know that, right? You're his Ananias." Samuel looked confused. "Ananias?" "From Acts. The man God sent to restore Saul's sight after the road to Damascus. Saul was a persecutor of Christians who became Paul, the greatest evangelist in history. Ananias was just an ordinary believer, but God used him to transform Saul. You're Richard's Ananias, Samuel. God used you to open his eyes." As if on cue, Richard approached them. "Pastor Williams, thank you for hosting this. Your facility is perfect." Pastor Williams smiled. "Our doors are always open, Mr. Thornton. Speaking of which, I haven't seen you at service lately." Richard looked slightly embarrassed. "I've been attending the early service, less conspicuous, but I've been there every Sunday since that first time." Samuel nearly dropped his punch. "You have? Why didn't you tell me?" Richard shrugged. "I needed to figure some things out on my own, without feeling like I was doing it to please you or anyone else. And I have figured it out." "Figured what out?" Pastor Williams asked gently. "That I've been wrong. About a lot of things, but especially about God. I've spent my whole life believing I was in control, that my success was entirely my doing. But looking back, I can see it now, the pattern, the providence you talk about, Samuel. Every major turning point in my life, there was something, someone guiding it." Pastor Williams put a hand on Richard's shoulder. "That's the beginning of faith, son. Recognizing God's hand in your life." "I want to be baptized," Richard said suddenly, surprising all three of them. "If you'll have me, an atheist billionaire who's done terrible things in the name of business, who ignored people like Samuel for years, who was almost murdered by his own brother because of the culture of greed I created. Pastor Williams smiled broadly. Son, the church isn't a museum for saints. It's a hospital for sinners. We'll be honored to baptize you. Samuel felt tears running down his face as he watched the man he'd saved physically now taking steps towards spiritual salvation. Ruth would have been so proud, so happy to see this moment. The baptism took place 2 weeks later, on a Sunday morning that saw the church packed beyond capacity. Word had gotten out that Richard Thornton, one of the richest men in Texas, was publicly declaring his faith. The media was there, but Richard had insisted they stay outside. This moment was between him and God, witnessed by his new church family. As Richard stood in the baptismal pool, Pastor Williams asked him to share his testimony. Richard's voice was steady but emotional. 2 months ago, I was dying. Not just physically, but spiritually. I had everything the world says matters, money, power, success, but I was empty, alone. Then God sent me an angel disguised as a janitor. Samuel Whitfield saved my life, but more than that, he showed me what I was missing: faith, community, purpose beyond profit, grace in the face of betrayal. I'm not the same man I was. I don't want to be. I want to be the man God intended me to be. As Pastor Williams lowered Richard into the water and raised him back up, the congregation erupted in amens and hallelujahs. Samuel stood in the front row, tears streaming down his face, thanking God for the miracle he'd witnessed. After the service, Richard pulled Samuel aside. I have something for you. He handed Samuel an envelope. Samuel opened it to find documents establishing the Ruth Whitfield Memorial Medical Center, a free clinic that would serve the underprivileged communities of Dallas, staffed by Christian medical professionals and funded by an endowment from Richard's personal fortune. Your wife's knowledge saved my life through you, Richard said. This clinic will save thousands more through her memory. It's already under construction. Will open in 6 months. Samuel couldn't speak. He just embraced the billionaire who had become his brother in Christ. 6 months later, at the grand opening of the Ruth Whitfield Memorial Medical Center, Samuel stood at a podium, looking out at a crowd that included everyone from homeless individuals who would be served by the clinic to state senators who had come to celebrate this unique partnership between faith and medicine. My wife, Ruth, always said that medical knowledge was meant to be shared, not hoarded, Samuel began. That every person deserved quality healthcare regardless of their ability to pay. She would be amazed to see her dream realized on this scale. But more than that, she would be thrilled to know that this clinic will treat not just physical ailments, but spiritual ones too. Every patient will receive excellent medical care, and everyone will also hear about the great physician who heals not just our bodies, but our souls. Richard spoke next, his transformation evident to everyone who had known him before. This clinic represents what's possible when we stop seeing people as statistics or profit margins and start seeing them as God sees them, infinitely valuable, worthy of love and care. Samuel Whitfield taught me that. He saw value in me when I was at my worst, when my own brother was trying to kill me, when I was lost in darkness. He brought light, God's light, into my life. This clinic is just the beginning of how we'll spread that light. The clinic's first patient was a homeless veteran named Michael, who needed treatment for diabetes. As the medical staff cared for him, Samuel sat with him, sharing his story, praying with him. It was exactly what Ruth would have done. Gregory Hartwell watched the clinic opening on the news from his prison cell. He had refused all visitors for months, consumed by bitterness and rage. But something about seeing Samuel at that podium, seeing Richard transformed, stirred something in him. That night, for the first time since his arrest, Gregory opened the Bible Richard had left for him. Inside the front cover was a handwritten note. Brother, I forgive you completely. Not because what you did was forgivable, but because I've been forgiven for my own sins. The door is always open for reconciliation. In Christ's love, Richard. Gregory read the note 3 times, then turned to the first page of Genesis. In the beginning, Samuel would later say that the call from the prison chaplain was one of the best moments of his life. Gregory Hartwell wanted to meet with him, wanted to understand this faith that had transformed his brother, wanted to know if forgiveness was really possible for someone who had tried to commit murder. Samuel drove to the prison the next day, carrying his worn Bible and a heart full of hope. Gregory looked different, broken but not bitter, humbled but not hopeless. "I hated you," Gregory said without preamble. "You represented everything I despised, a nobody who dared to interfere in my plans, but you saved Richard, not just from the heart attack, but from becoming like me." "How?" Samuel leaned forward. "Mr. Hartwell, I didn't save your brother. God did. I was just the instrument he used, and he can use you too, even now, even here, if you let him." They talked for 2 hours, Samuel sharing the gospel with the patience Ruth had shown when explaining medical procedures. Gregory listened, asked questions, wrestled with the implications. Finally, Gregory asked, "Could God really forgive me? I tried to murder my own brother." Samuel opened his Bible to 1 John. "If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just, and will forgive us our sins and purify us from all unrighteousness." All unrighteousness, Mr. Hartwell, even attempted murder. Gregory broke down crying, years of pride and hatred crumbling under the weight of grace. Samuel prayed with him, led him through confession and repentance, and watched another miracle unfold. When Richard heard about Gregory's conversion, he immediately requested a visit. The brothers met in the prison visiting room, separated by glass, but united for the first time in their lives by something greater than blood or business. "I'm sorry, Richard," Gregory wept. "I'm so sorry. I let envy and greed consume me. I wanted what you had so badly I was willing to kill for it. Can you ever forgive me?" Richard pressed his hand against the glass, and Gregory matched it on the other side. "I already have, brother. Months ago. We've both been changed by the same grace. We're brothers twice over now, by blood and by faith." The news of Gregory's conversion made headlines, but Samuel avoided the media attention. He continued working at Thornton Enterprises, now in his executive role, but still maintaining the humility of his janitor days. He instituted programs that ensured every employee, from the night cleaners to the senior executives, had access to the same opportunities for advancement, the same quality health care, the same respect. Dr. Nathan Prescott, serving his sentence in a minimum security facility, reached out to Samuel through the prison chaplain. He, too, wanted to understand this faith that had transformed his co-conspirators into different people. Samuel visited him monthly, patiently sharing the gospel with the man who had tried to poison Richard. It took a year, but eventually Prescott too found faith. He began working in the prison medical facility, using his skills to help other inmates while serving his time. He wrote letters of apology to every patient he had ever wronged, including Richard, who forgave him publicly, and even contributed to a fund for Prescott's eventual reintegration into society. David Mitchell's security firm was hired by dozens of companies wanting to implement the integrity protocols he had developed with Samuel. But more importantly, David started attending Blessed Redeemer Baptist, eventually becoming a deacon and leading a ministry for veterans struggling with faith and purpose after military service. Angela, David's assistant, who had helped uncover the conspiracy, was so moved by Samuel's faith in action that she began asking questions about Christianity. Samuel's patient answers and consistent witness led her to faith 6 months after the trial ended. She now runs the technology ministry at the church, using her skills to spread the gospel through digital means. The Ruth Whitfield Memorial Medical Center grew beyond anyone's imagination. Within 2 years, it had 3 locations across Dallas, serving thousands of patients monthly. Medical professionals from across the country volunteered their time, inspired by the story of a janitor whose inherited medical knowledge had saved a billionaire and transformed an entire community. Richard used his influence and wealth to establish similar clinics in Houston, San Antonio, and Austin, each one bearing the name of someone who had served others without recognition. The janitors, the nurses, the security guards who had made differences in people's lives without fame or fortune. At the 3rd anniversary celebration of the first clinic, Richard stood before a crowd of thousands. He had lost weight, his heart condition carefully managed by Dr. Morrison, who had become his personal physician and friend. But more than physical health, he radiated a spiritual vitality that money had never been able to buy. 3 years ago, I was the richest man in Texas and the poorest soul you could imagine, he said. I measured worth by net worth, value by stock value. I walked past Samuel Whitfield for 12 years without seeing him, without recognizing the treasure that was pushing a mop in my building. But God saw him. God positioned him exactly where he needed to be, exactly when he needed to be there. He paused, looking at Samuel in the front row. Some of you might think this story is about how Samuel saved my life, but it's really about how God saved my soul. Through a janitor, through a betrayal, through a heart attack that should have killed me, through a church that welcomed a cynical atheist, through grace I didn't deserve and couldn't earn. The crowd erupted in applause, but Richard raised his hand for silence. There's one more announcement. After much prayer and consideration, I'm stepping down as CEO of Thornton Enterprises. The company will be restructured as a benefit corporation, with 51% of profits going to charitable causes, particularly medical care for the underserved. And the new CEO, the man with the integrity, wisdom, and heart to lead this transformation, is Samuel Whitfield. Samuel nearly fell off his chair. The crowd went wild. Pastor Williams, sitting next to him, whispered, "God's plans are always bigger than ours, brother." Samuel tried to refuse, insisting he wasn't qualified to run a multi-billion-dollar corporation. But Richard was adamant. "You have something that can't be taught in business school, Samuel. You see people as God sees them. You understand that true success isn't measured in dollars, but in lives changed. The board has already voted. It's unanimous." Later that night, Samuel stood in his modest apartment, looking at a photo of Ruth. She smiled back at him from the frame, frozen in time, but somehow still present. "You always said God would use our story, Ruth," he whispered, "but I don't think either of us imagined this." He thought about the journey from pushing a mop to running a corporation, from being invisible to being interviewed by national media, from grieving widower to God's instrument of transformation. It seemed impossible, like something from a movie. But then, with God, all things were possible. His phone rang. It was Gregory calling from prison, where he now led Bible studies for other inmates. "Samuel, I heard the news." "CEO. That's incredible." "It's terrifying," Samuel admitted. "I don't know the first thing about running a company that size." Gregory laughed, a sound free from the bitterness that had once defined him. "You didn't know the first thing about exposing corporate conspiracies either, but God equipped you. He'll equip you for this too. Besides, you've got something Richard and I never had when we were in charge." "What's that?" "Humility, the knowledge that it's not about you, it's about serving others. That's what will make you a great CEO." After the call, Samuel knelt beside his bed, the same way he had every night since Ruth died. But tonight his prayer was different. "Lord, I don't understand why you've chosen this path for me, but I trust you. Help me to lead with integrity, to never forget where I came from, to see every employee as you see them. Help me to use this position not for my glory, but for yours. And Ruth, if you can hear me up there, I hope I'm making you proud." 5 years passed. Thornton Enterprises, under Samuel's leadership, became the most admired company in America. Not for its profits, though those remained strong, but for its revolutionary approach to business as ministry. Every employee received a living wage, comprehensive health care, and opportunities for advancement regardless of their starting position. The company chapel, which Samuel had installed on the ground floor, was always open, staffed by chaplains who provided spiritual and emotional support to anyone who needed it. Richard, now in full retirement, spent his time traveling to churches across the country, sharing his testimony. The atheist billionaire who found God through a janitor had become one of the most powerful evangelical voices in America, not through preaching, but through the simple telling of his story. Gregory was released after serving 4 years of his sentence. The rest commuted for good behavior and his work with prison ministries. Richard hired him at the Ruth Whitfield Memorial Medical Center, not in a position of power, but as a counselor for people struggling with addiction and crime. The brothers worked together for the first time in their lives without competition or envy, united in service to something greater than themselves. Dr. Prescott, upon his release, had his medical license restored under strict supervision. He worked at the free clinic, earning a fraction of what he once made, but finding more satisfaction in serving the poor than he ever had in serving the rich. His expertise in cardiology saved dozens of lives, each one a small redemption for the life he had tried to take. On the 10th anniversary of that morning, when Samuel found Richard collapsed in his office, they held a celebration at Blessed Redeemer Baptist Church. The sanctuary was packed with employees from Thornton Enterprises, patients from the clinics, former inmates from Gregory's prison ministry, and members of the community whose lives had been touched by the ripple effects of one act of obedience to God's calling. Samuel stood at the pulpit where Pastor Williams, now in his 80s, had asked him to speak. Looking out at the sea of faces, he saw not a congregation, but a family. Richard and Gregory sat together in the front row, brothers reconciled. David and Angela were there with their families. Even Prescott was present, his face showing the peace that came from forgiveness received and extended. 10 years ago, Samuel began, "I was invisible, a janitor whom the world overlooked, but God sees everyone." He saw me. He saw Mr. Thornton in his office that morning. He saw the conspiracy that threatened to destroy lives. And he saw the potential for redemption in everyone involved, even those who seemed beyond saving. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "My wife Ruth used to say that God doesn't waste anything, not our pain, not our skills, not even our mistakes. Everything can be used for His glory if we let Him. The medical knowledge she gave me saved a life. The invisibility I resented became the tool to expose corruption. The betrayal that should have destroyed the Thornton brothers became the catalyst for their salvation." The congregation was silent, hanging on every word. "I stand here today not as a CEO, not as someone special or extraordinary, but as living proof that God uses ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Every person in this room has the potential to be used by God in ways you can't imagine. The question is, will you let Him?" He looked directly at Richard. "Mr. Thornton, would you like to say something?" Richard stood and walked to the pulpit, no longer the imposing figure who had once commanded boardrooms through fear, but a man transformed by grace. "For 60 years, I believed I was God of my own universe," Richard said. "I built an empire on that belief, and it nearly killed me, literally and spiritually. But God, in His infinite mercy and humor, sent me a janitor. Not a priest, not a theologian, not someone with degrees in divinity. A janitor who knew how to save lives because his wife had taught him, who knew how to see truth because his faith had taught him, who knew how to forgive because Christ had taught him." He turned to Samuel. "Samuel, you didn't just save my life, you saved my soul. You showed me that real power isn't in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in service to others. That real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in lives touched. That real success isn't climbing the corporate ladder, but lifting others up as you climb." The two men embraced at the pulpit, and the congregation erupted in a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. As the celebration continued into the evening, Samuel stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The Dallas skyline glittered in the distance, Thornton Enterprises Tower standing tall among the buildings. But Samuel's eyes were drawn to the stars above, barely visible through the city's glow, but there nonetheless, constant and faithful. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered, "for all of it. The pain that taught me compassion, the loss that taught me to treasure what matters, the invisibility that taught me to see others who are overlooked, the trials that taught me to trust you. Thank you." A hand touched his shoulder. He turned to find Pastor Williams, aged but still strong in spirit. "Ruth would be so proud, Samuel." Samuel smiled. "She always said God had a plan. I just never imagined it would be this big." Pastor Williams chuckled. "That's the thing about God's plans, son. They're always bigger than ours. The question is whether we're brave enough to say yes when he calls." Samuel thought about that morning 10 years ago, when he had hesitated for just a second before entering Richard's office. That split-second decision to act had changed not just 2 lives, but thousands. Every patient treated at the clinics, every employee given a fair wage, every prisoner who found faith through Gregory's ministry, every person who heard Richard's testimony and turned to God. All of it traced back to a janitor choosing to help someone who had never even acknowledged his existence. "I almost didn't go in," Samuel admitted. "For just a second, I thought about walking away. He'd ignored me for 12 years. Why should I help him? But you didn't walk away." "No." I heard Ruth's voice in my head, clear as day, saying, "God doesn't put you somewhere by accident." So I went in. Pastor Williams nodded knowingly. "That's faith, Samuel. Not the absence of doubt, but the choice to act despite it. And look what God did with that one act of faith." They stood together in comfortable silence, an elderly pastor and a janitor turned CEO, watching the stars and marveling at the mysterious ways of God. Inside the church, Richard was talking to a young man who had just started working as a janitor at Thornton Enterprises. The young man, barely 25, looked overwhelmed by the attention from the famous former CEO. "Don't ever let anyone tell you that your job doesn't matter," Richard was saying. "The janitor who saved my life taught me that every person, every role, every act of service matters to God. You might be cleaning offices tonight, but God might be preparing you for something you can't even imagine." The young man nodded, standing a little straighter, seeing his work through new eyes. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, Samuel made one last stop. In the church's memorial garden was a small plaque he had installed 5 years earlier. "Ruth Whitfield, beloved wife, faithful servant, teacher of hearts. Her knowledge saved lives. Her love saved souls." He placed a single rose beside the plaque, as he did every week. "We did it, Ruth," he whispered. "Not the way we planned, not the way we imagined, but we did it. Your medical knowledge, your faith, your love, it all mattered. It all led to this." A breeze stirred the leaves of the oak tree overhead, and for just a moment Samuel could swear he smelled the lavender perfume Ruth had always worn. He smiled, tears in his eyes, but joy in his heart. As he walked back to his car, he passed the church's message board, which Pastor Williams updated weekly. Tonight it read, "God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called." Samuel laughed softly. That could be his life story in a single sentence. His phone buzzed. A text from Richard, "Board meeting tomorrow at 8. Don't be late, Mr. CEO, and thank you, Samuel, for everything." Samuel typed back, "Thank God, not me. See you at 8. As he drove home through the Dallas streets, Samuel thought about tomorrow's board meeting, about the new initiatives they were launching to help even more people, about the expansion of the clinics, about the scholarship programs, about all the ways they were trying to be God's hands and feet in a broken world. But mostly, he thought about a morning 10 years ago when God had used a janitor to save a billionaire, and in doing so had saved so much more. He thought about how God could use anyone, anywhere, any time, if they were just willing to say yes. He thought about Ruth's faith that had sustained him, about Pastor William's wisdom that had guided him, about Richard's transformation that had inspired him, about Gregory's redemption that had amazed him. Lord, he prayed as he drove, whatever you have planned next, I'm ready. Use me however you need to. I'm just a janitor who you made a CEO, but I'm your janitor, your CEO. Everything I am, everything I have, it's all yours. Thank you for this incredible journey. Thank you for showing me that no one is invisible to you, that no one is beyond your reach, that no act of service is too small, that no person is too lost to be found. As he pulled into his driveway, his phone rang. It was an unknown number, but something prompted him to answer. Is this Samuel Whitfield? The voice was young, scared. Yes, this is Samuel. How can I help you? I'm a janitor at Mercy General Hospital. I was cleaning the executive offices tonight and I found something. Documents. I think someone's trying to hurt the CEO. I don't know who else to call. I heard about what you did at Thornton Enterprises. Can you help me? Samuel smiled, seeing God's hand already at work. Yes, I can help. Tell me everything. And don't worry, God's got this situation in his hands already. He just needs us to be willing to act. As he listened to the young janitor's story, Samuel marveled at how God worked, using the overlooked and underestimated to accomplish his purposes, turning janitors into heroes, atheists into believers, enemies into brothers, and ordinary moments into extraordinary testimonies of grace. The cycle was beginning again, and Samuel was ready. After all, he was living proof that God could use anyone to change the world. All it took was faith, courage, and the willingness to see every person as God saw them, infinitely valuable, worthy of salvation, and capable of being used for His glory. The story of the Christian janitor who saved the atheist millionaire had become legend in Dallas and beyond. But for Samuel, it was just the beginning of a life dedicated to proving that God's love could transform anyone, that no one was beyond redemption, and that sometimes the person pushing the mop might just be the angel God sent to save your life. As he helped the young janitor navigate his crisis, Samuel smiled, knowing that somewhere in heaven Ruth was watching and smiling too. The knowledge she had shared, the faith she had demonstrated, the love she had shown, it all continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways they never could have imagined. And that, Samuel knew, was the real miracle. Not just that a janitor had saved a billionaire, but that God had used that moment to save countless souls, to transform an entire community, to prove that His power was made perfect in weakness, that His glory was revealed through the humble, and that His love could overcome any betrayal, any hatred, any sin. The Christian janitor had seen the symptoms everyone else ignored. But more importantly, he had seen the God everyone else overlooked, working in the shadows, using the invisible to accomplish the impossible, writing a story of redemption that would echo through eternity. And the story was far from over. It was, in fact, just beginning.